Hey, so I'd like to thank you all for being at this work session. Madam Clerk, could you please read the roll?
Mr. Bozen?
Here.
Mr. Amos? Mr. Morrissey?
Here.
Mrs. Klein? Here. Mr. Foyce? Mr. Greider?
Here.
And Mrs. Juon?
Here.
All right, thank you.
Motion to approve the agenda as proposed.
Second.
Motion's been made with the second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? All right, we have an agenda. I did receive word from Mr. Amos. He will not be in attendance tonight. And I received a note from Mr. Foyce, who said he would not make the work session, but he would be there for the regular council meeting. So I did note those two. The first item is the Title I discussion of edits. So just to note, I think at this point we've all had a few weeks to look over that. So I at least want to make it through this part this evening. So Kelly.
All right, we're going to be starting on page 8, and that's section 1-4A-12, council participation via telephone or video. So since we've gone through our experiences last, 6 to 9 months with video chat and having Zoom meetings, I did take the liberty of making a couple changes to the language in section 12 that includes the references to video. Part of the language that we had there before says that council would provide a reliable telephone number. I would propose to change that. We could look at changing that language to a reliable telephone number or internet connection. Does council have any discussion about that?
What, Kelly, what is the exact wording in that paragraph? Could you read that? Because there's so many different color schemes in this. Could you read the exact one as being proposed?
Yeah, the document is quite colorful, that's for sure. The language that would be proposed would be council member who is physically unable to attend a meeting may participate via telephone or video. And the proposed language would be they shall provide a reliable telephone number or internet connection, a quiet environment, join the meeting by 5:30 p.m. and attempt to remain on the phone or connected to the video conference for the entire meeting.
Okay, thanks, Kelly.
Sure.
So in effect, you added that or internet connection.
Yep, that's correct.
Okay.
Any comments or concerns? I mean, you guys have been going through Zoom for several months now. Any concerns over that language?
Sounds good.
Okay.
Kelly, the question I would have, if I'm on the meeting and I'm only able to be here to 6:15, should I not join the meeting?
Yeah, that's kind of what the language is proposing. We want council members, if they're going to try and participate by phone or video conferencing, to be on the agenda for the entire meeting. So that would avoid just hopping on to vote on one item and then hopping right back off.
Yeah. All right. Council, any questions about that?
But, Mr. Mayor,
Yes,
but I just want to make sure that if you get a call and you have to leave, that's not going to negate your vote, right?
So you're saying if we're in the middle of discussion and the roll call's been called and you step up and you like get off the phone or the video conference to take another phone call, is that what you're referring to, Mr. Morrissey?
No, say you get called out of the meeting because, as we had discussed earlier, you get one of these emergency phone calls. Your vote still is going to count, even if you can't return to the meeting.
You mean your previous vote or when we're in the middle of calling a
Yes,
vote?
your previous vote, and then if you would happen to return to the meeting after you've dealt with your emergency.
Yeah, I would say
You're still going to be able to participate.
so let's say and keep in mind, we're talking about just being on the telephone or on video chat. So let's say you voted on an item, had to, for whatever reason, step out of the room, missed a vote, and then came back in and voted again. Anything that you were present and voted on would count. Anything that you were not present to be voted on, or to have your vote counted, you wouldn't have your vote counted. But I think we're kind of
But then
confusing the point with, this is talking specifically about your connection and your ability to remain on the line and provide a quiet and controlled environment free of distractions to participate in the meeting.
Yeah, I understand that, but I just want to make sure that if you would return to the meeting, that you would be allowed to participate again.
Yeah.
Council, thoughts, questions?
Yeah, I think that is, what I was concerned about is sometimes we may have something come up, and maybe it is letting the chair know that, hey, I have, this happening at 6:30. So I'll be here. I think the reason it was written like this, because sometimes there'll be something that's hot and heavy, and so someone would just join the call or a video for like 5 minutes, and then turn around and get right off the meeting. So I'm hoping the general intent of this is just to make sure that we're going to be there, but I would hate to be in Iowa City with a parent or something, and then something happens and I need to take the call. But I think letting folks know in advance and communicating that would probably solve that problem.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, ma'am.
my concern is Kelly's response to your question. When you said, hey, if I know I'm going to have to leave at 6:15, should I not come to the meeting at all? And I thought I heard you, Kelly, saying you should not come to the meeting. Is that what you said?
I
Is
don't
that
believe
how
I
I
said
interpret?
that. I did
So-
not say that. My
Okay,
comments were in line with what the mayor had to say about the intent of this section.
okay, so if you know you're going to have to leave at 6:15, you're still encouraged to come to the meeting from 5:30 until 6:15, correct?
Yeah, I guess so. If that's how a council member wants to be present for a meeting, I mean, I can't stop them from doing that, but
Okay.
the
Well,
intent,
it's not
for
ideal, but
the intent
yeah.
for this specific section is, if you're going to participate via telephone or internet, it's to minimize the amount of distractions that are going on in the background, because it does become really hard to hear a member when there's a lot of noise in the background. Let's say,
Sure.
you're at a conference or a meeting and you're stepping into a noisy hallway to take the phone call and we're getting a lot of feedback. That's incredibly distracting. And then it in turn makes it difficult to hear what you're saying, what other council members are saying, and when we're taking a vote, recording down the vote.
Okay, I get it.
And I appreciate that, but I still
Sharon,
want
let
to
me,
be sure.
Let me jump in, so I think I
Okay.
can explain it. So if you are going to be joining via telephone or via video, we would ask that the entire time you're doing that, you're in a quiet place with reliable internet and reliable telephone. If you have to leave, stuff happens, but you want to make sure that the duration of that meeting, you're in a safe, quiet, reliable internet and telephone
Okay.
situated place. Is that right, Kelly?
Yep, that's correct, Mayor.
All right.
Now,
Got
if
it. I'm sorry, I read that wrong.
no, you're okay. If we have questions about attendance and the duration that you're present for a meeting, then I think those concerns need to go back to section 11, where it talks about council member absence.
Well, I think I read that wrong, started the confusion, so I meant that. So this is making sure that if you are participating, you have a quiet and reliable place to do so for the whole meeting. So I'm sorry about that. So
That's okay.
I'm good with that if council is. All right, 13, Kelly.
Mr. Mayor, though, one of the other things that was brought up in this and is on the sidebar here is the words attempt to. And I don't know if council had any because we're asked to pick between either have an attempt to as part of this or have it completely taken away and say, rather than an attempt to remain, just and remain on the phone. So, I mean, we were given the option, and my choice would be attempt to.
That's correct,
Yeah,
and
I
that's in the version that I read, Mr. Morrissey, as well. Attempt to remain on the phone.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that we knew that discussion could take place, Kelly.
Any other council comments on that? Attempt to
No.
versus remain? I think,
Attempt to is fine.
okay. All right, section 13, placing items on the agenda. Let's see. This section breaks down different requirements for placing items on the agenda for mayor and staff and for council members. And it also discusses what sort of a vetting process an agenda item would go through. So just to read a little bit, in section 13A1, mayor and staff members would submit agenda items using the agenda management software, which is Novus Agenda, which we use for our meetings. Council members, there is a decision required down here. The language currently reads, council members shall submit regular session agenda items to the mayor and shall do so by the deadline designated by the city clerk. Items submitted by council shall be reviewed by the city attorney, city clerk, or appropriate staff to be placed on a work session agenda for discussion and review prior to being placed on the regular agenda for a vote. I would recommend that we do include work sessions in that language for city council members. And then if we go down to towards the bottom of the page, the decision that we're asking council to make is two different versions of that council submission language, and I can read both of those. Number 1, council members shall submit regular session agenda items to the mayor and shall do so by the deadline designated by the city clerk. Or 2, council members shall submit regular session and work session agenda items to the city clerk and shall do so by the deadline designated by the city clerk.
Kelly, just, and I think you know that from the information I sent to you, that I believe that we should submit them to the city clerk because of what it says in B, as far as the mayor has the final approval of all items listed on the agenda. And my concern, again, is that the mayor, whoever that might be, is going to have the option to veto whatever any council member might put on there as part of their legislative duty within the city. So that's where I come down on this. I believe it should first go to you, and then it goes through that process. And then if the mayor doesn't want it on the agenda, he has to let council know, and then council can bring it up and ask it be put on the agenda or back on the agenda.
Okay. And then just so everyone kind of understands that process and put Mr. Morrissey's comments into context, subsection B is addressing that. So that reads, the finalized agenda and packet shall be available to the public at the close of business of the Friday preceding the council meeting. The mayor has final approval of all items listed on the agenda submitted by staff members. Once finalized, the mayor may withdraw any item prior to the council meeting and shall do so in writing in the form of an amendment notice provided to council at the start of the meeting. The amendment notice shall include a reason for withdrawing the item. Council may choose to keep the item on the agenda by a majority vote. Any comments from council?
Mr. Mayor.
Sir.
So Kelly, and I'm sorry, you all, that I missed the earlier discussion about this. I was at the hospital with my wife and new daughter. I know there was some discussion.
We never got to it.
Okay. Well, I know there was some discussion about how many meetings to have. I know that was a discussion earlier. Would some of this language change if we decided to go to 2 meetings? Because I think, from my understanding, there was some discussion about having work packets out earlier to the public and council. So would some of this language need to change in that case about it being available the Friday preceding council? That's my only question for clarification on this one.
Yep, that's correct. So if we did discuss switching to 2 meetings per month, which would require that some of this language will need to change. What I would recommend at this point is we just go through and okay the language on its face. We'll have another separate work session to discuss a little bit further switching to 2 meetings per month, what that looks like, deadlines, etc.
Okay.
Well, then yes, sir.
Just then with that, I just agree with Mr. Morrissey, since the mayor will come into the process later, that we submit it to whomever the city clerk is.
So if possible, would council take a look at, like you said, mayor and city clerk? Then that way, as far as scheduling purposes, it can get on there. But also, I mean, an example, Mr. Greider, would be the where there was already something taking place with was it the resiliency planning or what was that with University of Northern Iowa, the sustainable group?
Yeah.
By being engaged in some of those conversations, I'm able to fit the pieces together and, facilitate things that I know that's taking place. The appropriate staff, Kelly is the appropriate staff to get it placed on the agenda, and then working with the appropriate person, but who would know who the appropriate department head or appropriate person to ask more so than me, since I work with every person within the city. And so I don't know if I've ever vetoed a work session, but at least have the ability to be able to work with the appropriate staff to do it. So yeah, I can go to Kelly, but you don't think it's at least novel to give a heads up to the mayor?
I would say that yes.
Not you directly. I'm just mean.
I would say it's common courtesy, and I guess that's how I comport myself. But yeah, that makes sense to me to include both of you, since you would know it might be a clear-cut issue, but who knows, it might be something, and you can figure out who it goes to, rather than us just emailing department heads. Is this your issue? Is this your issue?
I agree. I think it should be city clerk and mayor.
Other council members?
Mr. Mayor? Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
I guess being there's nobody else talking, the reason why I suggest this is the city clerk has the deadlines for when we are to submit to her, so she can get it on the agenda. And I'm not a fool enough to think that if it goes to the city clerk we even have in here reviewed by the city attorney and city clerk and appropriate staff, you're the boss over all them. It's going to go to you. It's no slight intended. It's just a clarification of where we, as council members, have to get our resolution or ordinance or whatever we're proposing to the city clerk. That's all it is. It's no slight to you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Mayor?
Mrs. Juon.
I agree with what Mr. Morrissey said. In practice, you're going to find out about it, but for that very reason, why not put it right in the language that it should go to the city clerk and the mayor? If in fact that's what's going to happen anyway, why not say so?
Well, in response to that, Ms. Juon, it's just another person that we've got to go through to get a resolution on that is going to go to the mayor anyway, when we have to get it to the city clerk. This is a have to. The mayor doesn't have to have it at the same time that the city clerk does. He's going to get it, or she will get it.
My belief is just to put it right in there, city clerk and mayor. It's just my thoughts.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, ma'am.
I agree with Mrs. Juon. It just seems much more efficient to get it done and get it out of the way right away.
Thank you. Mr. Bozen, any comments?
It's just a click of a mouse to include you and the city clerk when I send an email, so I don't have a problem with it.
Thank you. Mr. Greider?
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's common courtesy, and yeah, it's like Mr. Boson said, it's just another name in a search bar on your email. It's not that difficult.
All right, thank you. Kelly, notate that change.
Got it.
All right. Kelly, you can keep going.
Sure. Okay, next section is subsection, okay, sorry. Next session, wow, I can't talk this afternoon. Affirmative motions. The one addition is subsection B, a motion to rescind an ordinance or resolution shall not be placed on the agenda in the affirmative. Any comments about section 14? It's pretty straightforward. All right. Section 15, order of business for regular meetings. So what this section does is it generally outlines how the order of business is going to be structured on our agendas. We start out with, and this is for regular session agendas only, we start out with a roll call, an invocation or moment of silence, pledge of allegiance, approval of agenda and minutes, and then we go on to public comment and the consent agenda. So under this part that talks about the consent agenda, it lists out items that may appear on the consent agenda, include but are not limited to the following, and I'll read those really quick. Resolution of bills, setting date of public hearing, assessment cancellation, water kill assessments, Cura applications, waiver for concrete driveways, award of bids, noise variances, travel request approval, license and permit approvals, board and commission and employee appointments, bonds, request to seek proposals, approval of change orders. So the purpose of the consent agenda is to put together the list of items that are really very routine. So if we do switch to 2 meetings a month, it will get longer, but that length would be due to the fact that we'd be combining consent agenda items from 2 meetings and putting it into 1 meeting. If council has issues, concerns about what's listed in the consent agenda or what might be listed in the consent agenda, now would be a good time to have that discussion. The remainder of the agenda would be reserved for public hearings, resolutions, ordinances, and then other committee business that may not necessarily fit into one of those other sections. Comments from council on the order of business?
Kelly, we can still pull things off of the consent agenda if we want further discussion, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Then I have no problem with the items you have listed.
And also citizens as well.
Yep, that's
That's
correct.
staying the same?
Yep.
Okay.
Anyone else?
Well, Mr. Mayor, I think I've said this before. I think too many things are going on the consent agenda. I think they need to be put on the regular agenda for our discussion, if we're going to have any, as well as to let the public have another chance to weigh in if they choose to do so.
So when you say another chance, are you saying that the public does not have the opportunity to weigh in on something on the consent agenda or ask a council member or staff to pull it off?
It's a lot easier for the public, and it should be readily available and easily available for them to comment without having to worry about the process to pull it off the consent agenda.
What to you, Mr. Morrissey, is cumbersome about the process to pull something off the consent agenda?
Some people don't understand that, Kelly. Some people may just tune in after, because there's something that they see there that they want to take care of. I'm just talking about making our meetings open and easy for people to go through. That's all.
Mr. Mayor,
This is Juon.
perhaps the solution is just at the beginning when we, especially initially, with these changes that if we're going into the consent agenda, we remind the council members and the public that they can remove something from the consent agenda if they want further discussion. I don't think that's that difficult, and I think you're underestimating the ability of the public to understand.
Who are you addressing that to, Ms. Juon?
Just the whole discussion, not anyone in particular. But I think we can assume that the public will be able to understand that nuance.
All right, so we explained the process a little bit more in depth.
It just initially until maybe they're more used to it. But I don't think it's difficult.
Okay. Right. Any other comments? All right, thank you. Ms. Felkley.
All right, section 16, mayor's role in approving legislation. In a nutshell, this section more or less puts into our code what state code already outlines as the mayor's power of approving a resolution or an ordinance. It talks about the time frame for doing a veto, which is consistent with what it says in state code. The effective dates of both resolutions, ordinances, and amendments. It's exactly the same as what's listed in state code. Any questions about that? Section 16? All right, moving on to section 17, ordinances. So this section provides just a general overview of what an ordinance is, how an ordinance is adopted, and when it becomes effective. Subsection D outlines the procedure for approving an ordinance. That procedure for an ordinance for a city employee or an elected official has to go through some sort of review process, either by the city attorney, mayor's office, city clerk, etc., so that there's an extra set of eyes on that document. It's very important that when we are putting ordinances together, they're done correctly, since they're more of a permanent piece of legislation. Then the ordinance always will go to a work session agenda for discussion. And this language also includes that a draft of the ordinance will be included with the packet, so that council will have the ability to review the ordinance when they're having the discussion about it. And then they will go on the next regular session meeting agenda for approval. So you would never have to approve or take a vote on an ordinance the same night that you're just hearing about it for the first time. The section goes on to talk about if there's the need for a change to a section of the ordinance, that has to be done prior to taking the first vote, because we do need the language for the ordinance to be consistent through all three readings. And it does give us a little bit of wiggle room if there's just like a mistyped word, punctuation error, something that would be minor and not a substantive change to the ordinance. Number 4 in this section talks about traffic and zoning ordinance changes. These historically have not gone to work sessions for approval or for discussion prior to going on to the regular session. A lot of times an ordinance for a zoning change is part of an ongoing process that's gone to planning and zoning ahead of time for additional scrutiny. And then traffic ordinance changes, they generally aren't very controversial. Does anybody have any questions about the ordinance section?
Kelly,
Yep.
Pat Morrissey again. Hey, in our rules of procedure, we have changed some wording dealing with situations where somebody says that they're not going to vote and they raise a conflict of interest, but then if they would raise that conflict of interest and it does not meet the criteria for conflict of interest, that vote shall, rather than be in the negative, it shall be in the positive or the affirmative. That language runs through all of these motions, ordinances, and resolutions, does it not?
Yes, anytime there's a conflict of interest, we've got, I'm just looking for that section right now. Yeah, section 28 talks about conflicts of interest. So the rules regarding conflicts of interest would apply anytime we're talking about a motion, resolution, or an ordinance.
Okay. And so it would be understood that if somebody was attempting to use a conflict of interest or saying that they didn't have enough information to vote on it and just left it as that, because I know we've had arguments before that a council member doesn't have to vote on anything or a particular agenda item if they choose not to. This would say that rather than that being a negative vote, it would be a affirmative vote.
I guess the ordinance section does not address conflicts of interest specifically. That's addressed in, like I said, section 28. But as I said before, anytime we're dealing with a motion, resolution, or ordinance, those rules for conflicts of interest are going to apply.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
That's a very good question. Thank you for that. All right, Kelly.
Okay, cruising right along to resolutions. Again, this section is kind of set up similar to ordinances. It gives a general overview of what a resolution is, how they're voted on, and also the process for how council members and mayor and staff get resolutions submitted to the agenda for approval, and that ties it back to section 13, placing items on the agenda. Any questions about resolutions? All right, moving on to motions. Again, following the same pattern as ordinances and resolutions, it talks in general about what a motion is and how they vary from what a resolution is and an ordinance is. And also the process of how we use motions within a meeting, so that they need to be have a motion and a second, that we can't have debate on it unless there's a second, that once it's put by the mayor, so once the mayor repeats back the question, it's in the possession of the council, and then how we dispose of those motions. I do want to draw your attention to subsection A within section 19. There is a sentence that I am recommending be struck, and that's the last sentence of A. And that sentence reads, "A motion once approved and entered into the record is the equivalent of a resolution in those instances where a resolution is not required by law."
Kelly, can you explain why you're opposed to that sentence?
Yeah, so I put some of that rationale in the comment box right next to that. It's comment CC 32. I wrote, "The sentence should be removed as it alters the purpose of a motion under Iowa law. Iowa code sets out the following differences between motions and resolutions." I've got a couple bullet points there. Council can read those, but in a nutshell, what it would do is add things in addition that we're not currently able to do with motions. For example, a mayor can't veto a motion. A mayor can only veto an ordinance or a resolution or an amendment to an ordinance. City clerk's required to authenticate all measures except for motions with his signature. So anytime we pass a motion, there's nothing put into writing other than what's in the minutes. Resolutions and ordinances get put into writing and have specific effective dates based on when the mayor signs those documents or vetoes those documents. What it would also do is make motions no longer effective upon adoption. So if we have a motion to adjourn, we'd have to put that we'd have to put that motion, for example, in writing, and we wouldn't be able to adjourn the meeting until the mayor signed that piece of paper saying that we're officially adjourned.
Any questions about that, Mr. Morrissey?
No, I just, I thank Kelly for going over that.
And yeah, and putting notes in that comment, thank you as well. So Kelly, our goal was to get to 19.
What time is
Because
it?
I see Mr.
Oh
I
yeah,
see,
we're way over time. Cut me
So
off.
I see the senator is on here as well. We made some decent progress. We'll pick up at 1-4A-20 at our next meeting, and I'm thinking we'll be able to make it all the way to the end at that point.
All right.
Or
Thank you.
should be, so one more session, but hate to stop now, but it is 4:20-ish, and we have Mr. Greider.
Yes. So, hello, everyone. Back in what seems like a million years ago, but was about 10 months ago, we unanimously passed a resolution declaring that climate change was a crisis and working to establish a climate action plan. And we were lucky enough to get in to a program through the CEEE at UNI that's doing some work with local governments on sustainability, and working with them to help them devise their own action plans around this. So it will be us, it's Des Moines, Cedar Falls is doing their own, though there's just a slightly different process, Independence, Decorah, and some other places. And so over the summer, there was an intern who was doing a lot of work. Her name's Elizabeth Smith, West High grad, super smart, who was doing a lot of the work on offering us some options about how we might want to frame our climate action plan, which is what is included in Novus. So the first one are recommendations that Elizabeth made for what ours should look like, and a couple of other really good options from some of our neighbor cities. So that is where we've been throughout the summer is looking at various ways and pieces that we might want to include in our climate action plan, so that we can put those pieces together, because we're not alone in this fight, and we can certainly learn from what other cities have done as we have moved forward. And Elizabeth and Senator Giddens are here. Elizabeth did write the plan, the recommendation plan, and Senator Giddens runs the center and has been a good point person on this. So if you have questions, I will probably defer to them because they are way more knowledgeable about this particular planning strategy than I am, considering all the work that they have done. But to give you an idea of where we're going this fall, Jennifer Sparks and Cody Leeseman with Intercog are working together with some Green Iowa AmeriCorps members, and they're having twice a month meetings to discuss how we can get more public input on what our climate plan should look like, what people in Waterloo particularly care about in terms of seeing this, as well as strategies about what might work and what might not work in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. Is it a program? Is it a resolution? Is it a law? All of those types of things. So that's where we're at this fall as we move forward in the very beginning steps of coming up with our own climate action plan. Senator Gins or Elizabeth, is there anything that I missed or did not clarify correctly in that summary?
No, it sounds good to me. Elizabeth, would you like to say some things? And then I'd be happy to after that.
I guess I didn't come with anything prepared, so I apologize for that. But yeah, this plan, I guess I wrote it with the intent of it serving as like a jumping off point for future projects. So it was just, I meant it to be like just like a pool of resources, of ideas, of people to get in contact with, similar projects to look at for like inspiration. It was really fun. It was challenging for sure, but I really enjoyed writing it, and I hope you guys find it useful.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I think it will be. And so I first just want to say hi to Mr. Mayor and Council. It's great to be with you all. Councilman Greider was referring to me as Senator, which I am, but I'm here right now in my role as a program manager at the Center for Energy and Environmental Education at UNI. And yes, one of the big programs, the largest program we have at our center is the Green Iowa AmeriCorps program. And so Elizabeth was a Green Iowa AmeriCorps summer member. She was just serving as a short term during the summer this summer, and she has a great interest in climate action. And so she did this research to kind of review what cities have done, what other cities have done, and pull out some interesting strategies that she thinks could potentially be applicable here in the city of Waterloo, and compiled all of that into a great report, which really will serve as a nice starting point for this climate action planning cohort program that we have going, that Councilman Greider referred to, that the city of Waterloo will be participating in, and 6 other local governments in the state. He mentioned most of those right at the beginning. So the process is, we have already done, and we haven't ever done a presentation of this to City Council, but our center a couple of years ago did a baseline greenhouse gas emissions inventory for the city of Waterloo, which is a compilation of some basic data for activities that happen within the jurisdiction of the city of Waterloo across the community that result in greenhouse gas emissions. So electricity use, natural gas use, transportation, fuel consumed, solid waste generated, water and wastewater use. Those are the kind of things that go into that, because all of those activities ultimately result in release of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. So we developed the baseline inventory that shows how much is the community of Waterloo contributing to greenhouse gas emissions, and that sets the baseline for this whole planning process. So what we'll be trying to do over the course of the coming year is get some input from the city, as Councilman Greider said, from community members, stakeholders within city government and others, but anybody we can, get to engage in this, about what sorts of things would they like to see the city examine more closely for their greenhouse gas emissions reduction potential. So, in other words, if you were to implement a policy or a program, we can help model what those things are going to do to reduce greenhouse gas emissions out into the future, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years down the road, so that you can then make an informed decision about what types of things you'd really like to dig into and pursue. You probably, at the end of the day, most folks want to pursue activities that are going to give them the biggest bang for their buck, essentially, in terms of reducing the environmental impact as much as possible for the least expenditure of resources, that kind of thing. So that's the process. We have full-time Green Iowa AmeriCorps members who are here for a full service term, who just started a couple of weeks ago and will be here through next summer, who will be engaging in this process. It's the same program that Elizabeth was a part of during the summer, but this will be a full term for them. We have support for this program through a partnership with an outside organization called ICLEI, which is an acronym for the International Council for Local Environmental Initiatives. They provide, technical support and resources and software actually that we do the modeling with that, helps us understand what reduction potential these different policies or programs could have. And so we're just kind of getting that organized now. We actually had planned on starting this whole thing back at the beginning of this year, and then COVID wrecked everything for most everybody. So it sort of just got stalled, and getting it back on track right now. Would like to do this over the course of this, more or less this academic year, starting now through late spring. So excited to work with the City of Waterloo. Yes, Jennifer Sparks in the building department has been the main contact person so far for the program in city staff, and we just pulled into the conversation Cody Lessman from Intercog, who is the transportation planner at Intercog. Actually had the first conversation with him today, and our Green Iowa members. So we're kind of working on getting all of this organized right now. But back to Elizabeth and her work is going to serve as like a great foundation for the types of things that we could examine more closely in this planning process. So, appreciate all of your support in that resolution that you passed, just kind of voicing that this is a problem, and it's something that all city governments should look at more closely. And now your approval to engage, with this cohort program that we have over the course of this coming year, and excited to see how that unfolds and what we're able to produce by next spring. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
All right.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, if I could ask Eric, thank you very much, Eric, for what you do, and Elizabeth does there at CEEE. And I have not seen that baseline greenhouse gas inventory for Waterloo. Is there any website we can go to see it, or can we get a copy of it?
Yeah, we never published it anywhere, Councilman Morrissey, because it never got presented to City Council, so it didn't seem right to share that, publicly without you ever seeing it first. And so it's actually been a couple of years since that was done. It was a student that I had working with me at the time who gathered that data and put it together. So I am happy to share it. I just wanted you to know that's why it hasn't been published anywhere yet.
Well, I sure would like to see it, Senator Giddens. I really would.
Okay.
And thank you for all you do, Eric.
You bet. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. And also thank you, Elizabeth. Thanks for your hard work and your efforts as well. And Councilman Greider for picking up the ball and making sure our voice is at the table where it should be. So I think our council members are looking forward to seeing the report, and I know within the next couple months, Councilman Greider, I think, will be back and give us an update and moving forward, I hope. So
absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, where are we at now? We have a presentation from Randy on the City of Waterloo recycling program. We have an update. So, Randy, are you out there?
Yes. Can you guys hear me okay?
We sure can.
All right, let me go ahead and kind of get the PowerPoint here. Give me just a second. Okay, are you guys able to see the PowerPoint okay?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Good afternoon. This is Randy Bennett, Public Works Division
Hey, Randy, this
Manager.
is Chris. Sorry to interrupt, but if you could hit the display settings at the top
Oh,
and then change that to duplicate. There you
There
go.
we go.
Thank you.
is that better?
Even better.
Okay. All right. So once again, this is Randy Bennett, Public Works Division Manager, and I also have Scott Brunson, who is our Sanitation Director, present. So first off, we're going to kind of give a brief overview of our volume as far as what we've taken in for recycling, garbage, and yard waste, and kind of give an update on all three of those. So what I'll try to do is go through the PowerPoint real quick and then try to take questions at the end, if that works out okay. So, of course, the first one that we want to start with is recycling. This is pretty much since we kind of revitalized our recycling program right after I started. We didn't have necessarily a contract at the time to take our recyclable materials, and we ended up evaluating some of our struggling areas and what we were doing good within that department, and it was kind of decided to go ahead and outsource that to try to help us offset some of the areas for which we were struggling. And that's kind of where the basis of this gets started with Republic, kind of taking over that service, and then how we were able to try to provide better services in some of our struggling areas. So the first slide that we're going to kind of talk about here is the recycling carts by month as far as what Republic Services has been collecting. So when we originally did this, we were anticipating right around 11,000 is what we had for our participation in both the recycling and yard waste program. So one of the things when we did initiate that program, we actually put the cost where it'd be $4, whether it be a combination of recycling, yard waste, or any combination thereof for both. So we were kind of hoping that everyone would participate in both programs when we ended up doing that. So when it first got rolled out, we were a little bit lower than what we initially started for those first couple of months. We did have some kind of hiccups as far as getting the carts out there, and then some people that dropped it and we started back up. But as you can kind of see in March, April, May, and June, each month, the numbers are continuing to rise, which is what we are anticipating. So as we get to the next slide here, this is where we're actually kind of doing the combination of both recycling and yard waste and just recycling. So kind of as I stated there previously, the December, January, February months, as it was kind of getting rolled out there, some of our numbers were a little lower than what we thought, because we thought for sure individuals would end up want the service for both of them. And as we continue on through the end of June, you can see that we're only roughly around 250 carts difference between who was participating in the recycling program and who was doing yard waste or both. So that was more in line as far as like what we were anticipating. The 11,000 mark is what we're really trying to shoot for. Each month we are starting to get an increase in that, which is good. So we want to continue to see those numbers decline, but that's kind of, we're heading in the right direction, and that's what we're kind of shooting for. So just to kind of break it down a little bit farther, talking about our volume trend. And this is where, how much more we've done in comparison prior to kind of revitalizing our recycling program. So as you can kind of see in the blue line for recycling in 2018 to 2019, that kind of shows the tonnages for which we have there. And of course, the orange line is where we are at now between 2019 and 2020. So if you look kind of on the yellow graph there, what the difference is per month. So from December to January, we had roughly almost 10 more tons of recyclable materials, or in other words, a little over 17% increase. And as we continue on throughout the process, of course, when you get clear over to June, July, we've increased our recyclable materials of 73 tons, which is almost a 200% difference in comparison to what it was a year before. So, and just to kind of give everybody a little background on where our recycled materials come from. Well, of course, the majority of it comes through our curbside recycling program. So, and that is we end up contracting out through public service. We also have our 4 recycling drop-off sites, which currently that is being processed and hauled to the recycling site through Ride Environmental. And then we also have our 1 month for the city recycling, where that's actually done through the city, where we go and pick up all the recyclable materials through all the city buildings. But as you can see through the chart, we're very excited to see that increase. We also understand that there's, other factors that are contributing to that. But like I said, we're definitely going in the right direction, and we're excited to see those numbers. So as we go into the next slide here, I'm going to go ahead and let Scott kind of give a little bit of brief overview on this and go from there.
So the reason we started with December of 18 was because with Republic Services taking over in December of 19, we wanted to do a fair comparison between the same time frame. So from December 18 through June 19, you can see this kind of gives you a more visual aspect of the tonnage of being about 353 tons, whereas December 19th through June 20th was closer to 627 tons, which is about a 77.8% increase. The month of June alone, we had a 200% increase in recycling tonnage, which of course requires more time and labor.
Okay, so so what is that actually telling us? As we're looking at the increase there, and what are some of the cause of that? So this is. I'm not sure. Yeah. So what's some of the causes as far as the increase? Of course, rolling out a new recycling program, that was kind of doing that. We kind of revitalized life back to it, brought it back to the forefront, so everyone to start doing that. But also within this time frame, of course, COVID has happened, and there's been a lot of different changes, nationwide and quite frankly worldwide as far as how people are doing things. You've got more family members that are, either at home now and or working from home. We had a stage in there where you had a lot of your college students that were home. You had individuals that were panic purchasing. A lot of businesses that were temporarily closed were not able to provide some service or were only takeout only. Of course, e-commerce was another one. But in this slide, this is where one of the things, Republic Service has kind of noticed, they're one of the top 2 largest providers of both trash and recycling throughout the nation. So they've actually seen a 30% increase in both of those services nationwide. So kind of pointing that out, that this is one of the things that, they pointed out what they noticed nationwide in the services for which they provide. So kind of showing what it is throughout the United States for Iowa and where it's actually broke down in Waterloo. So like I said, they've seen a 30% increase for both trash and recycling on average. Through the state of Iowa alone, they're seeing anywhere from 10 to 20% of an increase through the various cities and towns for which they represent. But most importantly, we kind of want to talk about Waterloo and looking at where our recycling and garbage tonnages are. So as you can see, we had an increase of around 6% in our garbage as far as, throughout this same time frame in comparison of the 2. And then our recycling is one that really want to point out where we've had a 77.8% increase. And that's, that's something to be proud of. That's good. You can definitely tell that recycling is something that Waterloo takes a lot of pride in, and we're getting better at it. So that's good news there. Right now we're starting to track our yard waste. We haven't necessarily been able to do that in the past, but it is something that we are working towards. So what are some of the impacts and increases of volume, kind of like what I stated before, what's first off, what's our fees? When we look at our landfill fee of $44.25 a ton, our recycling for the disposal and the transfer rate is $182 a ton. and then what our rebate is as far as our recycling materials. So when this was done, it was around 11.24. Unfortunately, just with increases throughout nationwide, some of the rebates unfortunately has gone down a little bit, so we're not quite getting as much. But we're hoping as the industry keeps evolving that those rates will eventually end up going back up. So one of the things that we've been kind of looking at is, what's going to be the new normal as far as with COVID, and what can we try to project moving forward as far as recycling and where it's going to end up going. Because like I said, when you look at our tonnages, a lot of it has gone up, but, but what can we try to, forecast as we go to try to move forward. So this is also another slide that we end up getting from Republic. Is kind of what some of their predictions as far as what they think is going to be some of the increases as far as both on the garbage and the recycling side. And what are some of the other costs as far as just, your normal operating expenses as well too. I know just on our own end, our PPE costs have gone up significantly just because of, we're sanitizing the vehicles more frequently. Unfortunately, if we do get individuals that have COVID, we go in a lot more depth as far as how we clean them, along with just the buildings and areas where employees are at. Not to mention face shields, masks, gloves, all the other things that are kind of included in that. Not to mention, because we have more volumes, there's also more costs associated with that, whether it would be fuel, time, equipment costs as well too. So that's just kind of one of the things that, we're trying to predict on how things are going to be going, as far as not only expenses, but just the service for which we're going to be providing. So that's kind of the recycling side. I'll jump into the garbage here real quick. So kind of where we're at for stats and trends there. So as I was kind of saying, our numbers are up on recycling, but they're also they're up on the garbage side as well. So as you can see here, you look at the orange line there, or the blue line, which is your 2018, 2019, with what our volumes are there, and then the orange would be what the 2019 and 2020 is. So just to kind of give you a little bit as far as what that increase is, you can kind of see in the weight difference and added load difference that are kind of down there below. So if you go from pretty much December to January, we had a little over 113 tons difference, which was a little over an 8% increase. Or what we factor everything is how many more loads we end up having to take to landfill. So that's roughly 10 tons per truckload when we end up doing that. So as you can kind of see, as you progress from month to month, getting into June, July, our tonnages have gone up significantly. But what all comprises of, refuse collection as far as pertaining for what the city of Waterloo collects. So we pretty much just do the residential collection. So that's where the majority of our tonnages come from, and that's done through sanitation department. Also within that department, we have some different programs and other things for which that department does, like our bulk item pickup, which we call the 10 for 10. So if you have, up to 10 items, a couch or a chair or different things that are too large for which you can't try to dispose of yourself, like taking to landfill, you can call us, and for $10, we pick those up. We also have our code enforcement cleanup. That's a joint venture that which we do that individuals that unfortunately have some items that are in their yard, they don't have them tidied up, and then they don't make a corrective action to get that done, then we will come in and we'll clean those. We also have the legal dumping, and unfortunately we just get some residents that dispose of things either on the side of the road and we're responsible to get those. And then also we have our dumpsters, that are just spaced out through all the city properties that we have to do. And the one thing that we do want to kind of point out through the COVID, that's kind of altered almost everybody's life. The one thing that we did try to do is still do all of our neighborhood cleanup and citywide cleanups, which we did. So some of those actually, the dates were pushed back a little bit on some of them, and that's why when you look at, for instance, May, where it's a little bit lower as far as tonnages wise, that's just because those collections just got pushed back a little bit. But the thing of it is, we still want to provide that service, especially if there's more residents and stuff at home, and you know, still try to keep some normalcy on how things were going. So kind of going over the garbage summary, and I'll go ahead and turn this over to Scott, and I'll have him kind of go in a little bit more depth on that.
Okay, so as explained before, we went through the same timelines as the previous year. Looking at the tonnage, you can see 18 through June of 19, looking at 10,412 tons versus December 19th through June 20th, 11,039 tons. It's about a 6% difference, but at the same time, you're also dealing with a much larger volume with garbage versus recycling. So that 6% equals out to about 260 ton difference, which is about 26 truckloads of trash.
So what does that impact, you know, when you talk about 26 more loads, and then, you know, understanding the difference between commercial and residential volumes. So for the city of Waterloo, we don't actually do the commercial pickup. So just trending wise nationally, you know, as kind of Republic stated, you know, in that previous slide, a lot of the commercial volumes have gone down just with temporary closures of businesses and, you know, more employees that are working from home and students that are home and all that. But unfortunately on our end, we've been the recipients to see all the increases, not only the increase in the volume in recyclables, but also in refuse. And those are all additional expenses that we've had to incur throughout this process. So, you know, whether it be increase into the landfill fees, fuel cost, labor cost, kind of like what Scott was just talking about, you know, at 626 tons, we get roughly 10 tons per truck. That's 63 more loads to the landfill, which we had to take throughout that time frame. So all those are, you know, additional expenses, wear and tear on the truck and everything else that all drives to increase in our operating costs. So the other part of the trend that, you know, when we kind of did this, especially when we were revitalizing our recycling program, was what was this going to do with our carts? So when we originally, you know, kind of did our fee structure as far as like the different size carts, of course we have three different sizes: the small, which is a 32, medium 64, and the large, which was 96. So when we originally did this, we anticipated a lot more residents going from the large down to medium or medium down to small. So we kind of actually increased some of our supplies on those because that was kind of the trend for which we were anticipating. But then unfortunately COVID happened. And so when that did, that was something that, you know, like I said, we didn't really know what was going to end up happening. And so some of those trends actually just went the opposite direction on what we had. So as you can see in the charts, you know, we definitely have a lot more large carts that are out there. And then some of our small and medium carts have unfortunately kind of declined. But that was something that we weren't necessarily prepared for. I know, like I said, when we originally were talking about the recycling cart, whether it would be repairs, replacements, and all that, that was kind of an area for which, you know, we were behind on and we weren't necessarily providing that service. So we also, throughout that time frame too, we had some change in staff. The previous sanitation director had kind of moved on, and then Scott come on. But in that time, you know, in the March area, we actually did get caught up to where everybody was current as far as wanting the right size container. But then unfortunately when COVID hit and you know, some of those trends started, we did make orders, but unfortunately just with the demand, not just from on our end, but also nationwide, you know, and vendors being able to get the carts in a timely manner, you know, unfortunately we have fallen back behind, but it's taken within the last month, and we finally got the carts to where we're now finally trying to get out there and get caught back up on that. But unfortunately, we kind of fell back on that. So the third phase of this would be our yard waste review, kind of give you guys an update on that. So yard waste was the other aspect as far as the shared containers for which we had. So we ended up reusing the recycling containers that we had, but then we also have switched to the brown yard waste cans. And that's primarily what we're going to want to try to move forward in the future. As you can see from January through July, our numbers have continued to increase, and which is good. The other thing we kind of want to just elaborate a little bit more on is the compost site, because one of the things that we did with initiating this new program is we also initiated the $5 maintenance fee, which goes towards, you know, funding and paying for the recycling drop-off sites, but it also goes to the compost site. And, you know, there's a lot of residents that use this, but I don't necessarily think sometimes they understand how much labor, staff, and to have one that's properly run on how we should end up doing that. So this is just kind of give you an overview on, as you can see, you know, some of the things that we expanded. Just this last year, we also have the free wood chips. That's something that working with leisure services to where residents can go out there and get wood chips to put around for landscaping. This picture, it was prior to the site being built, but down kind of where the welcome sign is. Leisure services also has their logs that they're taking out there now, to where residents can go out there and pick that up to use for firewood. That's also free to them, along with after we process all the material for which we collect, we end up giving that back to free compost. So almost 99% of the material for which we collect is reprocessed to where we can eventually give back to the residents and end up kind of in a form of recycling. So here we're just kind of showing, you know, as far as the collection of recycling. Here's our driver, or not recycling, but yard waste as they come up to pick it up. In 2020 alone, we had just a little over 13,000 carts that were tipped with a little over 492 tons. One of the things that we are doing different on all of our carts moving forward is we're going to have scales on them, so that way we can attract for the weight on the material for which they go to collect. So in partnering with ASPRO, they were nice enough to let us use their scale. It's roughly around 75 pounds per container when we go to dump those. Now, granted, that varies, you know, whether if it's been raining and the material's more wet or it's dry, but on average is kind of the number for which we are doing until we can kind of get the scales on the trucks. So as we get into the next part, you know, we kind of wanted to give a little bit more background on, you know, what it actually takes to process this material. So on the top left, you kind of see where the trucks are. That's where they come and dump it. You see the second phase here is where we're talking about the yard waste. As you can kind of see, they're grabbing the brush and the lead material. They're coming down to where the grinder is. They dump it into it. It grinds that material up into a mulch material. You can kind of see the bottom on the bottom right there that is hauling it to stockpile that. Up above, you know, this is where we'll take some of that compost material. We'll start putting it into windrows, so that way it helps accelerate the biological process to break that material down. So that's when we're going to doing that. The fourth phase, I'll kind of start that now. That's where you can kind of see we've got our grader, where we have our turning machine where it turns that material, so that way it breaks it up, it turns it, so it helps accelerate that process. This was something which we contracted out in the past with a hauler. We actually kind of have it rigged up to our road grader right now and eventually do our loader, but as you can see, it kind of helps with the process there. And the final stage, which the fifth and final, which would be down at the bottom, and this is where we take that material once it's broke down, we end up putting it into the screener. The screen goes in circles. It brings out the finished material, which is kind of on the bottom of the screen, and the material that hasn't fully composted will come out the conveyor on the other side, for which we end up windrowing and doing that. So as you can see, there's a lot of parts, there's a lot of equipment. It's a lot of labor and time to be able to do this, but it's, you know, it's processing that material to where we give it back to the residents for free, you know, whether it be the compost or the chips or the wood. So kind of following it all up, you know, after we initiated the recycling program, there were some of the things that we said that we wanted to do, you know, to help with some of our struggling and deficient areas. So the first off, we were kind of, when we implemented this, we were looking at acquiring 2 additional staff. Like I said, that would be for like the cart repairs, cart exchanges, deliveries, pickups, and the code enforcement. We just had a civil service meeting last week where that was kind of approved. We're just now going through the process now. to try to move forward with trying to acquire those two individuals, so that way we can pick up on those areas. We're also looking at our recycling sites. You know, one of the things that we stated, we were wanting to kind of cameras at all the sites. We do have some cameras there. They're just not as effective and actually more or less ineffective, because we've unfortunately had some individuals who are doing things that weren't necessarily able to do that. So that's an area we still need to follow up on. It more than likely won't happen until next year, along with the landscaping improvements that we want to do with the sites too. A lot of it just had to do with COVID and reevaluating how things were doing. Like I said, we reprogrammed, you know, making sure that we were going to do what we said we were going to do. And the last one that what we are working on now, we kind of step back up with that, and that has to do with, you know, our CART program. You know, it's an older program, but we're also looking at getting the cameras and the route optimization in our trucks to where we can run our routes more efficiently, kind of using the rule of right. And like I said, and then unfortunately, if we do have the individuals that put things in that they're not supposed to, or individuals that put their carts out late, you know, we would be able to have photos of kind of showing those. And that's something that we're still anticipating getting done yet this fall. So I try to go through that as quick as I can. So I guess with that being said, we're open up for questions as far as, you know, through recycling, refuse, or yard waste.
Mr. Mayor.
Mayor had to step out a moment, so Mrs. Juon will turn the chair
Yes,
duties over to
Mr.
you.
Morrissey. Thank you,
Yeah,
Kelly.
Randy, a few questions for you. When do you foresee those two employees being on board?
Yeah, like I said, we just finally, civil service meeting was last week. We have the paperwork in. You know, some of it, to be honest with you, with COVID, we kind of delayed. Plus, we wanted to make sure we had enough time that what we were anticipating our revenue and expenses were going to end up being. You know, so working with Michelle, you know, we seem to be like we're on track now, and that's going. So right now, like I said, the paperwork was just done. The portion for civil service was just done last Friday. So hopefully here in the near future that we're able to do that. Either way, we do have some staff that we have one individual that is going to be retiring here next month, and another one that tentatively is already looking at next year. So, you know, going through the civil service process and establishing a list is a good thing, because we are going to have opportunities.
Thanks, Randy. And what about the contamination numbers and costs? Have they gone down from what they were before, or how much are we paying for those contamination costs?
Yes, yeah. So since we ended up splitting out the containers, especially on the recycling side, in comparison to the amount of yard waste in there, our contamination has gone down significantly. And I can also tell you on the yard waste side, especially on our processing side, that has gone down. On the yard waste side, you know, the only way we can really quantify that is just, you know, looking at older material in comparison to the newer material. On the recycling side, you know, a lot of that has to do from the different vendors, and, you know, as far as the fees go, and I don't have that right in front of me, but as far as our you know, contamination fee in comparison is drastically gone down, significantly gone down compared to what it was.
So we're saving some money, Randy.
Yes, we are. Correct.
Okay. Yep. And the two other things real quickly. How many complaints have we received, or do you care to even talk about regarding the increased costs? Because I know that I field those complaints from people every now and then, especially elderly on Social Security, fixed incomes. And then the second thing is the yard waste site had a fire. Where on that picture was the fire?
Okay. I guess the first portion, I guess I'll kind of talk about is, you know, of course, you know, we had gone, I forgot how many years it was, without an increase. And then not only that, but we also reevaluated, you know, to try to make it more fair and equitable on who's paying for what. So like the $5 maintenance fee, that was probably, I would say, has been the majority of the questions as far as why residents are required to pay for that. And like I said, you know, in the past, you know, it was pretty much funded through the recycling program, where now all residents are paying for it. So I would say that's probably been the largest one as far as residents inquiring them. But then, you know, once we actually explain it to them on what it's going for, you know, it's going for the recycling drop-off sites for which all residents are able to do. And then, like I said, the compost site, you know, as far as, you know, what it takes to operate that site and what the free services that residents were able to use, you know, whether it's the compost or the wood chips or even be able to get the firewood now. You know, those are all things that, you know, unfortunately some residents didn't even know that we had that. So, you know, once we kind of explain that to them, you know, and of course unfortunately there are still some residents that don't utilize either one and would rather not pay it. But, you know, the thing of it is something that they are, you know, it's a service for which they're providing, whether they choose or not. You know, unfortunately, by having that, you know, there has to be a fee associated with it. We really didn't get too much as far as like the increase in the size of the containers. And then, of course, with COVID, like I said, that's completely changed because, you know, we have a lot more individuals that are going to the larger containers, which we didn't necessarily anticipate that. So, but I would definitely say for sure, you know, the first and second time individuals got their bills, you know, some of them, depending on when they got it in that first quarter, it was prorated in comparison to the second time when they got the full amount. But I think people are more accustomed to it now, and of course, nobody wants to pay more for any service. But like I said, once we go to explain it, you know, most people are understanding of it. When it comes to unfortunately, the fire that we had, you know, that happened Saturday afternoon. It was after staff had left. Not quite sure what actually caused it to start. They weren't necessarily seeing any heat and stuff that was coming through, but unfortunately, you know, the fire department had to go out there. And then that's the pile for which when residents come, that's where like the leaves and the brush and their yard clippings and garden clippings, that's the pile that actually caught on fire. So I got to give kudos to the fire department. You know, they did a great job. We also had to have staff out there to kind of spread that pile out, you know, to finally get it extinguished. You know, it was still smoldering. You know, of course, with the winds yesterday, that didn't help us. We kind of had to move some of our windrow piles to try to make some more room. Our goal is we want to evaluate it again tomorrow to make sure that we have everything, you know, safe and extinguished. And if that's the case, we'll kind of restockpile it. And our goal is to hopefully try to have it back open tomorrow. Just unfortunately, we're not 100% sure how it's started.
Thanks, Randy.
Any other questions? Great presentation, Randy. Thank you very much. Very helpful. If there are no other questions, take a motion for adjournment.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you all. Finance will get back together in just a couple minutes. Welcome and call to order the Waterloo City Council Finance Committee. Roll call, please.
Mr. Morrissey?
Here.
Mrs. Klein?
Here.
Mrs. Juon?
Here. Would someone
Motion
take
to-
the agenda in minutes?
Motion to approve the agenda in the minutes of October 5th, 2020 as proposed.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right.
Opposed? Motion carries. Not sure how to divide this one up. Does somebody want to take all of it? Travel requests, pre-authorizations, and budget line items, please.
Go ahead, Mr. Morrissey.
Well, I'd be happy to.
Thank you, Mr. Morrissey. Go
Yeah.
right ahead.
First of all, our travel requests, and that's for John Martin and Matt Chesmore, rehabilitation specialists, to go to the 16-hour lead inspector refresher online, October 13th and 14th, for $800, not to exceed that amount. Pre-authorizations over $2,500, Central Garage Fire, and Fire for the amount and estimated shipping and handling, $2,715 for the annual fire pump certification testing. Next is community development with the amount and estimated shipping and handling, $3,250 plus $100 shipping and handling for resourcing of an XRF machine. Next is leisure services, amount and estimated shipping and handling, $125 per hour, not to exceed $20,000 for snow and ice removal on newly constructed sidewalks and crosswalks in the Kimball and University Avenue corridors. Next is a sewer department with the amount and estimated shipping and handling, $4,800 for lift station units calibrated for the new Zetron controller. Next is the sewer department again, with the amount and estimated shipping and handling, $9,456.56 plus $265 shipping and handling for one Zentron Model 1550 Centramax industrial alarm processor. Next is the sewer department again, with the amount and estimated shipping and handling, $3,800 for needed multi-channel ground penetrating radar exploration of roadside work on fiscal year 2020 wastewater treatment plant biosolids modification project. Next is traffic operations with the amount and estimated shipping and handling, $3,130.53 for 140-foot Valmont Black Street light pole. And finally, the budget line item to be amended, approve the budget amendment to use CDBG CV funding received for the CARES Act to prevent, to prepare for, and respond to COVID-19 in the amount of $737,227 as submitted by Community Development.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Finally, on bills payment, as in bills payment dated October 12th, 2020, in the amount of $4,968,264.36. Move to receive, place on file, and forward to the full council.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? We are adjourned. Do we set a new record, Kelly?
That's questionable.